r/AskReddit. Serious redditors who have a stepfather/mother younger than them. What's your story? My parents married young, as was typical in the 60s. A decade into it, he was screwing our babysitter. He eventually left our mom and married her. That only lasted a few years. Dad then played knight in shining armor to a succession of young women "down on their luck", on the outs with their parents, raising kids on their own with no other help, etc. Same pattern over and over. Swore he wasn't screwing them, but who knows. They were always about the same age, late teens to early 20s, no matter how old my dad got, or how much older we, his children, were compared to them. Ultimately his work took him to the Philippines. You can see where this is going, can't you? And became involved with a young woman there. He said they were just friends and all his many trips there were to help her and her family. We rolled our eyes. Eventually Dad informed us he had married her, so she could come to Canada for a better life. She is about 5 years younger than the youngest one of us. I don't have any beef with her. She's a kind and decent person, and hardworking, albeit too submissive and deferential to my dad. I'm sure that's part of what he likes about her. My problem is with my dad alone, who has repeatedly proven himself to be a self-centered narcissist fixated on younger women. He congratulates himself for "saving all these people and helping them out of their miserable lives" when he's never had the time of day for his own kids or grandkids. He's lied and broken promises his whole life, and I have no respect for him. When I married, I would not let him walk me down the aisle. A few years ago, when I visited, I stumbled across his history on his computer. It was the most unsavory collection of porn involving young teens and underage girls. I can't say I was surprised in the least. As for me personally, I've spent years in therapy trying to untangle a lot of crap surrounding my dad. Although my head knows what he is, and that I shouldn't give two shits about him, the sad reality is that part of me inexplicably still wants his love and approval. Not only has he fucked up our own relationship, but he's contributed to my own legacy of being unable to commit, and my screwed up sexual mores. Healing is a long process. Background: my mom and dad divorced when I was very young. So young, it is impossible for me to even remember. I'm very lucky they stayed good friends. I'm 34, my dad is 65, and he's in a relationship with someone who's 26, so 8 years younger than me. They've been together for 3-5 years, and are happy together, and I'm happy for them. At first it was a bit awkward for me, up to the point that it took me a half year before I decided to meet them together. At first I just met with my dad alone every week. I was mainly worried about my dad, still am, a bit. He came out of a long relationship that went really bad, got cheated on after 8 to 9 years, and he had a really rough time with it. So I was scared he would end up in the same depression if this one went bad as well. Not because of cheating, but the age difference eventually could catch up to them as an issue. I've spoken openly about my worries with my dad a few times along the last 3 years, and it will take time for them to actually go away. There's a 38-year age gap, and my dad, at some point, will get health issues because of age, and I'm cautious of what will happen. Both of them assure me they love each other and that they'll take care of each other no matter what. I fully believe they believe that. I fully believe they love each other. That's very apparent from the way they interact. And I'm very happy they feel that way with each other and found that happiness. But I'll always be worried that when the typical health issues start, someone will have to do the day-to-day care, and that brings a lot of strain on a relationship. Even couples who've been together for 30+ years and are roughly the same age. In this case, they'd potentially be together for less than 10 years when it starts. I hope my dad remains 100% healthy till he's 100, but realistically, so happy they are happy, cautiously optimistic for the future. I'm a guy, 23. My dad is 64, was 40 when I was born, and last year he married a woman who was 22 at the time. My parents weren't really together, never got married, and split soon after I was born. My mom's black, and my dad's an Iranian who came to the US in the 70s as a student and never left. Revolution in Iran meant he was stuck with no visa. My dad left school, was pretty transient, moved up and down the East Coast, and eventually settled in New Jersey, where I'm from. I didn't keep much contact with my dad, but I started talking to him again a few years ago. He didn't have much companionship, so eventually he went back to Iran, met a woman who already had a kid and was divorced, looking to make a better life for herself. So my dad married her, and she and her son came over just before the Trump ban. My dad talks pretty freely about his feelings toward his wife, and hers toward him. He'll say things like, "Obviously she doesn't love me. She just used me to come to the US." Both my dad's wife and her son have had a hard time learning English. The wife had a mental breakdown last year and checked herself into a psych ward, into which I'd also checked myself a year prior for depression and attempting suicide. My dad's pretty poor and lives in a mostly ghetto neighborhood with not much to do. It sure seems like my stepmother is isolated, and until she learns English she's pretty much at my dad's house all day long. Another fun fact, my mom's mom is younger than my dad. My mom's mom had my mom at 17, when my dad was already 19. I'm 35 and my dad's wife is 25. I now have a little sister that is 6.5 years younger than my son. He is 10. I always considered my dad an old dad when I was younger, always much older than my peers' fathers anyways, but now he is in his 70s and constantly tired from toddler antics. Honestly, I love his new wife. She was not the one who broke up my parents' marriage and is the sweetest person ever. She actively plays and interacts with my son and would help with anything that I asked. She is genuine and kind. My mom feels the same way and often has both my father and his wife join us for holidays. She has never begrudged my father's current wife, but it probably took around 10 years for her to have an amicable relationship with my dad. Honestly, I think she feels sorry for his current wife. Mom wants us to have a relationship with our new sister and does everything she can to foster that. My first stepmom is an entirely different story. My parents were married for 25 years before they divorced. A visiting nanny took great interest in my dad and a seemingly easy shortcut to citizenship and comfortable life. She actively pursued my dad, who obviously failed to put up much resistance. My mom found evidence of money transfers and love letters, and that was that. She filed for divorce. The nanny eventually married my dad, and my sister and I inherited our first stepmom that was younger than us. I think she was 20 at the time. This woman was a monster. She would monitor all phone calls between my dad and I. She forbid him to visit us at Christmas or holidays. He had to sneak a meeting with us, and she bought my sister and I a pair of socks each for gifts. In comparison, she treated herself to overseas vacations and ridiculous amounts of plastic surgery. It wasn't the gift itself, it was the sneer on her face while she handed them to us and had the audacity to let us know how she thought really hard about what to get us. Eventually we just stopped talking to my dad. During this time mom would receive harassing phone calls that she should give up her house, the one the nanny initially visited and decided would be hers one day, and in exchange the nanny would care for my sister and I. We were still in school and my dad agreed to support us until we were finished our post-secondary educations. I believe the demands had to do with both being upset she hadn't taken our family home, as she fantasized she would, and the fact that she thought supporting us directly would cut down their costs significantly, end my dad's payments to mom, and she could feed us gruel. I'm not sure what her exact plans were. She was more than a little unbalanced. My mom just laughed at the audacity of her calls. They were completely ludicrous, and we suspect she was drunk or high each time it happened. We found out after nanny and my dad divorced that she had stabbed him not once, but twice, after losing her temper. 2 separate incidents, once in the shoulder and once in the back. He had to visit the ER and claimed it was an accident each time. They also managed to have the police kindly ask they stay out of an entire city after a very public fight at a restaurant. She had also broken countless items around their home while they argued, and basically was batshit crazy. The day her citizenship papers arrived she told my dad she was filing for divorce. I try not to keep tabs on her, but have heard that she married an even older gentleman, I think late 80s, who is quite wealthy and is just waiting to collect her inheritance. So, that's the story of my 2 stepmoms. One is the sweetest person ever, one is the devil. Both younger than me. This is a doozy. Hold on to your hats, boys and girls. A TL. Doctor of my life before stepmom. Mom and dad never married, but had 3 kids. They broke up, and dad married his current wife with whom he adopted 2 kids with. I have never met my dad's wife, and don't really want to. On to the actual story. First of all, my father is no saint. He's cheated on his current wife many times. The stepmom in this story, let's call her Linda, is actually his latest mistress. Linda is older than me by 2 years, but younger than my older brother by 1 year. We first met her on one of our few weekends away with my dad. And the only reason we are meeting her is because dad knocked her up and had just given birth to my baby brother. Because my dad wanted us to have a relationship with him, we got to spend 1 weekend a month with him at his vacation house. This was a lot of time spent with my dad compared to the last 20 years of my life, so I went along with it despite the whole cheating element. But then the drinking started. When they drink, Linda turns into a raging, jealous paranoid banshee and my dad loses his temper really easily. During one of their many fights, she accused my dad of cheating on her, and she actually used my baby brother as a shield. We had to pry my baby brother from her because they were both hurling stuff at each other. My dad decided to stop drinking, but she didn't, despite having a health condition that gets worse when she drinks. And when Linda gets drunk jealous, she keeps contacting my dad's wife. Eventually, my dad and Linda break up on not good terms, but my dad kept up support for my brother. When my brother was 3 or 4, Linda took him far away and told my dad he couldn't see him anymore. My dad stayed in contact with Linda's mom, who is younger than him lol, to get updates about my brother, but did not know where he was. He sent child support to Linda's mom every month. Linda's mom felt guilty and eventually told my dad the truth. The kid wasn't actually his son. Linda had cheated on my dad with her ex-BF and pretended it was my dad's because my dad had more money. A fake. Dad has stopped child support but checks on him from time to time. Good news is, my dad has sworn off mistresses to live a more quiet life. I mostly feel bad for my baby brother because he's caught up in all this crap. TL. Doctor, dad knocked up mistress. They fought a lot 5 years later. Dad finds out the baby isn't his. Late to the party, but I'm a 35-year-old male living with a 64-year-old woman. We'll have been together for 6 years this July and we're all but married at this point. She has 2 sons, 38 and 43, both of whom have done time for drugs. The 43-year-old is a piece of shit who stole all his 87-year-old grandmother's, my wife's mother, money after taking temporary custody of her and then leaving her home alone when she has severe dementia. Nobody talks to him anymore, except his 2 kids who don't really know what a piece of shit he is and live in Japan currently due in part to an understandably spiteful ex-wife. The 38-year-old is covered in prison tats and looks intimidating, but is a good father, a hard worker, and generally a smart and compassionate guy. I'm no thug, so frankly many bricks were shat when first meeting her sons. I met them separately thankfully. Things were a little awkward at first, but they both understood that I was no threat and I was serious about my feelings for their mother. Now that time has passed, we can tell that the younger one at least is happy that someone is taking care of his mom, and I'm happy to be the one to share this part of her life with. The older son is still a piece of shit. Fuck him. I feel bad for his kids, but maybe best they are so far away for now. As for my side, she's met my immediate family, sister, mom, my father and his current wife. She's also met my grandmother on my father's side. Everyone's cool with it, and they can all see that we love each other and are overall pretty normal, and it's not some kind of creepy or overly sexual thing, and she's not some weird cougar who's trying to retain her youth through her vagina or take advantage of me financially etc etc. This is going to be all over the place because I try to block this part of life out of my memory. My dad, 53, is married, I think, to a woman that's around 30. I have a half sister who is also 30. This lady called my dad daddy in front of me and her kids. At first, I got along with his new wife and her 2 daughters, but as we grew older and went through puberty, I wanted to have some more privacy. She made us shower together and shit. So our relationship became really rocky after that, because her daughters were raised very strict environment. As a result, they grew up really slowly, like they played with dolls until high school. I didn't want to play with fucking dolls when I'm about to go to high school, so obviously we grew apart, and their mom didn't like me because I wouldn't play with them. She raised them like this, probably because she grew up way too quick, and fucked up, and married a guy, and had kids who drained her financially. Now she's using my dad as a come up. After a few years, she told her youngest daughter to tell me to pressure my dad into asking him to marry her. I should also mention that my dad is very successful and runs his own company, and he met this lady when she was living in a rundown basement barely affording rent, and he moved her into a newly furnished condo. So yeah, gold digger. There are other factors that make me sure of it, but I think it's pretty obvious based off of what I just said. Long story short, this lady and her kids teamed up on me and bullied me for years behind my dad's back. There are so many incidents I can't even begin to explain, and I really don't want to get into the details. I'm almost 20 years old, and to this day, I break down when I talk about the mental fuckery these bitches put me through. She was also always accusing me of trying to break them up because she thought I wanted my parents to get back together. I didn't lol. She may have been 30, but she acted like a child. I went to a therapist because I had depression and suicidal thoughts when I was 13. Because of the three of them, I almost killed myself and self-harmed. The therapist told my dad to stop bringing me to his house to see them or something along those linear. Thank fucking god. I don't know what she did, but I never saw those evil twats ever again. I live happily with my mom, who is a saint. Hey, I can actually contribute to this weirdly specific thing. The story is that my mom was friends with this one lady for years. One of her sons worked on my old stepdad's ranch, and she had a few other kids as well, including Brad. Brad is a year younger than I am. I had met him a few times when we were young, between 15 and 17, roughly, but I didn't see him often as he was constantly incarcerated. Many years go by without me even thinking of Brad. My mom now has her own ranch, and that lady, Brad's mom, is living there and working as a ranch hand. She keeps talking about Brad getting out of prison. He comes to visit. When he gets out, we catch up. It's pleasant enough, but he's a total scumbag, tweaker, racist when convenient, and I don't really want to be anything more than cordial with him. He has nowhere to go, so my mom lets him stay a while. A while becomes a few days, which becomes a few weeks, and I see them getting awfully chummy. I didn't want to admit I saw that shit coming, but I totally did. I'm up late one night watching TV when I hear my mom getting fucking pounded in the next room. I was goddamn furious. My mom has dated absolute pieces of violently abusive shit almost exclusively throughout my entire life, so I was more than used to it by then, but this white trash midget bridge troll was younger than me, never had a job, no intent to ever get one, and never did, and was lunatic meth head. I was 21, he was 20, not even old enough to buy his own alcohol, something he would use as a joke to get under my skin. Hey boy, go buy your new pappy some beer. Fortunately, I developed a hell of a sense of humor growing up in such a shitty environment, so I'd just talk shit right back. You know what, Brad? When I was your age I was taught to be respectful to my elders. Go to your room, you're grounded. No fucking my mom for a week. He was constantly wasted on anything he could get his hands on and eventually started putting his hands on my mom and little brother. I'm in no way a tough guy, but he tried that shit in front of me one night and I broke my thumb and wrist from punching the shit out of him. I finally got to take out all my stepdaddy issues and was rewarded with a Norco prescription. He would constantly steal shit. Other people's things, my things, whatever wasn't nailed down. He brought home stolen cars a few times. He stole my mom's S10 and ran from the cops, flipped it, and launched our German Shepherd out of the bed and still tried to run. We found our dog the next day, confused as fuck, but somehow completely unharmed. One day I came home to find him laying on the floor getting a giant white power tattoo from a guy that looked like the human embodiment of Hep C. The first time I was ever arrested was because of him. The police found out he was my younger stepdad and mocked us mercilessly the whole ride to the jail. It was humiliating. I was later found not to be involved with Brad's bullshit and released with no charges, but not before sitting in a cell with a fucking lunatic that murdered a car full of teenage girls. It was in our local news when it happened. I recognized him from TV for a few days. He always brought his tweaker friends around. One of them broke into our house while everybody was asleep and woke me up so he could steal my truck. I was butthole naked and he violently shook me awake, threatening me with this fuck off huge wrench, demanding the keys and title to my pickup. He took off with it and none of us ever heard from him again, and the truck never turned up. Fucking dope ass old school liftedness and with bullet holes. Boy, I miss that thing. His tweaker friends burned down my mum's shed, destroying a lot of treasured, irreplaceable shit I had in there. Even though he's been out of the picture for a few years, I've put up with 11 years of jokes from every direction. I'm able to joke about it better than anybody could even hope to, but it still fucking pisses me off inside. I heard every Jerry Springer joke under the sun, and it ruined the show for me, and my friends will jokingly hit on her in front of me, and she's happy to flirt back. I just roll with it and make with the funny jokes, but I really want to fucking brain them all. Now she's married to a guy that's a couple years older than me, but he's actually alright. I'd known him previously as well, and we got along well enough. He actually has a job and treats her and my brother well, so I jaff about the age similarities. This years ago, my 55-year-old grandfather got a 20-year-old woman pregnant. My grandmother, who had stage 4 cancer, hasn't even died yet. For the record, he was a womanizer. He's a great provider and we are really close. He was like a real father to me. His kids, my father, aunt, and uncles, were aged late 20s to early 30s at the time my grandmother died. She was dearly loved. We didn't know about the mistress then. A few weeks after she was buried, he brought her home. I remember playing at the neighbor's house. I was called to come home, and I met her. She had a baby in her arms. We initially did not accept, because my grandmother was an angel and we couldn't replace her. They got a new place and such. At first, she was nice. The family accepted her eventually. Since I was very close to my grandfather, I had to bear with her. As I grew older, she grew more jealous of me. I was really precious to my granddad. She would serve him like a master, while my grandfather would serve me like I was this precious cutie child. So basically, she thinks it's unfair. She mistreated me bit by bit, in ways you wouldn't really see it, but you know something's off. Maybe I was too young to say anything. Anyway, I became a teenager, and I was really feisty. I knew she was on me, so I started fighting back. I wanted my own phone, so I tried to tell my granddad and she would interfere like, oh, just get me a new one and I'd give her my old one. I didn't say anything, but I didn't take her phone. I could live without it, rather than she gets a new one. One day, we fought over the computer. This was early 2000s and only PCs were available to us, and my granddad decided to just buy me a new one so there wouldn't be an issue. She was like, why is she getting the new computer? Why not me? Red flags started showing. She had my grandfather wrapped around her finger. She turned into this try-hard social climber woman. Whatever the family got, she needs also to have in the exact same color and exact same brand and model. Then, she started hurting her children. Jump to a few years later, my grandfather's health started deteriorating. She completely changed. She got surgeries. She went on a fitness gym. She started buying new clothes. I was living with my boyfriend then. When I visited home, I was surprised to see her house in such a mess. She never cleaned. My granddad's room was filled with cobwebs and looks like it hasn't been vacuumed for at least months. She had attitude problems, but this was a big change. She would be gone for days. I confronted her woman to woman. I grew up and decided to give her a chance. I said as much as I would want to ignore her, I couldn't let this go on. She said she wants to start over. I said go ahead, I wouldn't mind. I'll take care of everything she leaves behind. She told me she'd let me know. Year 2017. She got worse. Her behavior got erratic. She would smash plates and glass and jars if things didn't go her way. She got more surgery. She would be gone out of the house for weeks. At this point, my granddad and their kids, aged 17 and 10, asked me for help. I moved back into the house, but the house was big enough to not see each other. We had our own living spaces. I was there to make sure everything's in order. She changed again, but as expected, she completely turned around. She abandons her kids and my granddad, who was really sick at this point, days at a time without food or money. Anything that was being sent to my granddad for his medication and dialysis treatments, she would take away. It was tragic. I found out she was using drugs. One day she was screaming for me, and it was really scary. It was like she was on withdrawal or something. I called the cops, and we had a talk. She blamed it all on us, the first family. She said we were mistreating her, and we think poorly of her. All in all, they assessed her for drug abuse. But unless we've got proof, and unless the children themselves file for abandonment, there is nothing we can do. It was so obvious she was in it just for the money. I'd like to say my granddad deserved what happened. I warned him years and years ago, even when I was still a child, to be careful. Now, he doesn't have a single dime. He relies on our allowances to feed his second family. It's so tragic. They used to have millions in our currency. I did not know where it all went. He was an intelligent person, but he let that woman get the best of him. Now, he's very poor and the woman abandons him for days. It's a tragic story, but a very real one. She's very horrible. She was good at first, because we had money, but now she's abandoned a sinking ship, if that's what you like to call it. My grandfather could die in a time, and she doesn't have their life together. They've got 2 kids and I don't know if she expects the rest of us to support them. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe the channel.